Today we are leaving sunny Bali to return back home to London. I'm looking forward to seeing friends and family, however, I am not looking forward to the cold. We'll be there for 5 weeks over the Christmas period before we get on a plane to fly to the Bahamas and hopefully try and win a $25,000 tournament. I'll take you on the journey as always.
Okay, glasses.
Get to making with jive, boy, say shout. When it hits you, yes, in the air, yes, yes, you shout. When it hits you, yes, in the air, yes, yes. When it hits you, yes, in the air, yes, yes, you shout. When it hits you, yes, in the air, yes, in the air, yes, you holler, yes. 1, 2, 3.
Landed in London. It is currently 3 degrees outside. Flip-flops not a good idea. Should have packed some trainers. Let's go and see what that cold is like out there. The cold English snap. Ooh. Oh. Nah, too cold here. Going back to Bali to tell you the story. See you back there. That's better. Return to Bali's warmth to tell you part 2 of my World Series of Poker journey this summer. I actually did plan to do this whole World Series in one vlog, but then I realized when I was filming part 1 that it would have turned into an hour-long episode, which I'm pretty sure not many people really want to watch me ramble on for 1 hour. I'm going to pick up from where I left off, which was finishing the $1,500 Six Max tournament. It was the second tournament I played, 2 cashes and 2 tournaments, and so far I'd cashed for $18,922. As is the case with tournament poker, you don't tend to cash every single tournament that you play. The next 3 tournaments I played, I did not cash in. I played the $1,500 Millionaire Maker, and I played 2 entries to the $365 Giant. The tournament after that, however, I did make quite a good run in. It was the $1,500 Bounty Tournament. Basically, in a Bounty Tournament, you get given a certain amount of money for each player that you knock out, as well as making the money and cashing in them. For this one, it was $500 per player that you knocked out. So you got these like $500 chips. To start off this vlog, I'm gonna get straight into a couple of hand histories that I played. I'm dealt the ace-7 of clubs in the hijack in this hand. It was very early on in the tournament, so we were all pretty deep. The mid-position player raises to 3 big blinds. I decide to flat. The button calls and the big blind calls as well. The flop comes 10 of clubs, jack of clubs, and the queen of hearts. The big blind checks. The mid position, who was the original raiser, he bets 6.5 big blinds into 12.5. I think there's a couple of options here. Obviously I'm not folding. I have the nut flush draw and a draw to the nut straight as well. I could raise or I could flat. I decided to flat in this instance because there's a couple of people behind me to act and I want to keep them in as well so that I can win a bigger pot if I am to hit one of my lucky cards. The button does decide to call as well and the big blind folds. So we're three-way to a turn, which was a beautiful card. It was the 3 of clubs. So now we have the nut flush. The mid position guy, he bets out 10 big blinds into a pot of 32, which is a pretty small bet at this point. It's a third pot. Now, again, I could raise again here, but I wanted to keep the button guy in and also he might do something a little bit crazy. So I decide to flat and the button guy does exactly what I wanted him to and he raises it up to 33 big blinds. The mid position guy folds and it's back on me. Now I have a decision to make. When the button actually raised, he did look very excited. This guy was a recreational player. I figured at this point, him raising to 33 big blinds, he was pretty much going to go with his hand regardless. And because I'm out of position against him, I want to try and get as much money in now as I can. I decide to go all in, which was about 82 more big blinds effective with his stack. And I didn't think he was going to fold, so I think it's probably a good shove there. So I do go all in and he calls it off. He had the 5-4 of clubs, which left him drawing completely dead, so the king of hearts on the river meant absolutely nothing. We ship a 313 big blind pot. Pretty nice very early on. And we also get our first bounty, which meant we earned $500 for knocking him out. After that hand, I probably didn't play my stack very well. I play a lot more loose in bounty tournaments as obviously the value of getting the bounties is pretty huge considering the cashes are a lot smaller. So I did chip down quite a bit and didn't find many spots. The next hand I'm going to tell you about is against a reg who seemed to be pretty competent and was very aggressive on the table. I'm not entirely sure whether I played this correctly, so I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say on this. I start the hand with 160 big blinds. I'm dealt the king of hearts and the 10 of hearts under the gun +1. It folds to me and I decide to open for 2.5 big blinds. I think this open isn't too bad, especially in a bounty tournament where obviously I want to be trying to get into a lot of pots with some of the shorter stacks. Anyway, it folds to the button, who is this reg. He decides to 3-bet me to 8.5 big blinds. The blinds quickly get out of the way and I decide to call. I'm not sure calling is really a great option here, but I think with my stack depth and his stack depth, actually it isn't too bad a call. If I was a lot shorter, maybe like 50 big blinds, it's almost definitely a fold. But because we're this deep, I decided to call. The flop comes king, king, queen, rainbow. So we hit trips. I don't have much of a leading range out of position, especially against regs, so I do decide to check. The button makes a very reggy bet, which is like a quarter pot. He bets 5 big blinds into about 20 big blinds. Now, I hate these kind of bets because I'm really not sure what to do. Like, I want to build the pot because I do feel like I have a strong hand, but equally, he's not going to get too out of line against me if I do decide to raise. So I do decide to call. The turn comes the 5 of spades. It now completes the rainbow board, so there's no flush draws whatsoever. I decide to check, and he quickly checks behind. At this point, when he checks behind, I'm pretty convinced I definitely have the best hand now. So when the river comes, which is the 7 of clubs, I want to try and get as much value out of this hand as I can. I decide for about a 2/3 pot bet, 21 big blinds into about 30, and he quickly calls and shows me the ace of clubs as he mucks. So it'd be interesting to see what you guys think he could have. Obviously, the only 2 hands I can think of are that he had aces or ace queen suited. The only other hand I could think he would have is ace 5 of clubs, but I think that's pretty slim. So I think it's either aces or ace queen there. After that hand, I don't really have many hands written down for some reason. I don't think I do a very good job at writing down the hands that I lose. So that's something I'm definitely going to improve on as time goes on. The hands that I've won clearly have quite a big chip stack, but I must have just been chipping down throughout the rest of that day. But there was one insane hand that happened on one of the tables that I was playing. I wasn't involved in this hand, but it was three-way. The flop was 4 of hearts, 5 of hearts, and the 7 of diamonds. And 3 people managed to get it all in on that flop. The hands that they had were just crazy. So hand 1, he had Jack 6 of hearts. Hand 2 had Ace 7 of hearts. And hand 3 had Queen 8 of hearts. So they all had flush draws. They all had some kind of straight draw, and miraculously, the King of Hearts landed on the river, so the nut flush ended up taking that pot down. I finished day 1 and I managed to get another bag, which was nice. I bagged around 46,000 chips. I can't even remember what the blinds were, can't even remember how many big blinds I had, but at least I had a bag to go on to day 2. Early on in day 2, I found myself chipping down, and I played a hand that I really want your feedback on because I'm not entirely sure. I think I played this wrong. This is my bust out hand. I start the hand with 27 big blinds. I'm in the big blind with pocket 3s. The low jack raises to 2.5 big blinds off about a 55 big blind stack. The button calls, who was also on around 80 big blinds. The small blind decides to call, who had around 60 big blinds. And this is where I think I make the mistake. I think looking back on it, I do prefer a peel here. I'd rather just call and try and set mine, as I do have a stack that can actually do something. However, I did decide to go all in for 27 big blinds. Now, my reasoning at the time, and the reasoning that I still have now, is that I figured if I get through the low jack there, I'm not going to get called by the button or small blind too lightly. And I feel like a pocket pair is pretty decent in this spot. However, what I didn't really think about was the fact that it was a bounty tournament, so people are more inclined to call because they get $500 if they do knock me out. I think actually this play is probably better in a non-bounty tournament, as there was about 10 big blinds or so dead money in the middle at this point. Anyway, the low jack does decide to call, so he calls off over 50% of his stack and the other guys fold, and he has pocket 6s, which actually I think is a pretty bad call from him, because I could easily have 7s through everything really, 7s through aces, and also most of the cards that I'm going to be shoving he's going to be flipping against for 60% of his stack. So I'll be interested to see what you would have done with pocket 3s. I imagine most of you would have peeled, which I do think was probably the right decision. I don't think shoving is terrible, as it does pick up a lot of dead money when most of them fold. I probably wouldn't have shoved if the low jack had 150 big blinds or so, as he's going to call a lot because it doesn't really affect the utility of his stack much if he does lose. However, I knew that it was going to be a huge portion of his stack at that time, so I thought he would fold. The board runs out pretty clean for him, and that was me eliminated in 218th place. I picked up 2 bounties. I cashed for around $1,500. So I cashed for around about $2,500. After that tournament, there was only 3 tournaments left for me to play. I played the $1,000 Super Turbo Bounty. I played the $1,000 tag team event with one of my housemates called Andreas. He started the day and lost about 70% of our chip stack before I even sat down. Thanks, Andreas, that really helped. And I also played the $888 Crazy Eights tournament. Unfortunately, I did brick all of those tournaments, didn't cash in any of them, so that was my tournament series over. I had a total buy-in of $8,183. I cashed for $21,568, giving me a profit of $13,385. I was very, very pleased to even just come into profit for the first World Series of Poker Festival that I played. I think it's given me a really, really good start to playing poker tournament festivals, getting an idea of how intense they can be, and I'm super, super excited to get back next summer, where I will be getting a lot more video footage and hopefully making a lot more vlogs, and hopefully making some really deep runs again. That would be nice. Now I'm going to tell you about some of the social sides and some of the other things that I did in Vegas, but I'm going to change location again. I'm not actually moving location, if you haven't worked it out already by now. I'm just literally moving around my apartment to tell you this story. But hopefully it makes it a little bit more interesting. The first thing I want to touch on is Vegas at the World Series of Poker, if you haven't been, is ridiculously hot. It was 40+ degrees Celsius most of the time I was there. Although I'd been used to the heat in terms of being in Asia for the most part of the year, I wasn't used to how dry the heat was. I remember the first few times I'd been to Vegas that my lips here would crack. So I was very, very careful to make sure I had a lot of lip balm throughout the trip. Something I would recommend to everyone out there. Make sure your lips don't crack, because every time you speak, every time you smile, every time you eat, it hurts like hell. Oh, drink lots of water too. One night, me and my friends went to play some golf at Top Golf. If you haven't been before, I'd definitely recommend going. It's a driving range, but you can also get food and drinks. It's kind of gamified as well, so you can put in your names and it shows you how far you've hit it, if you've got it into the hole or what have you. The people that went, it was me, Gazzy, my friend TS, another friend called JP, and a guy I hadn't met before called Svansa online. He's a high stakes cash game player. And when he showed up, before he even picked up the golf club that we were just using that were there, he had a special golf glove. So I thought at that point, I don't have much of a shot of even winning here if this guy's got a golf glove. It was pretty obvious early on that Gazzy and Svansa were actually golfers, as they just kept hitting the back wall every single time, and I was just slicing it off left, right. Fortunately, my friend TS was a lot worse than me, so I didn't come last, which is great when you're a competitor like me. I hate coming last. After we'd finished playing the golf, a couple of guys that we didn't know challenged me and TS to a game of cornhole. And at this point, I had no idea what cornhole was. I imagine most of the American viewers out there, and Canadian, have played this game a lot and know exactly what this game is. They tried to hustle us. They wanted to bet some money on it. I refused to bet because I don't like taking a bet unless I think I have an edge. I definitely didn't have an edge in a game that I'd never played before. TS, my friend, being the degenerate gambler that he is, he decided to put some money on it with them. I actually wasn't too bad. I managed to get the beanbag thing through the hole quite a lot and onto the board, and we were actually doing quite well. We weren't getting hammered. I threw one of the beanbags that landed basically on each corner around the hole, and the guys we were playing were absolutely flabbergasted because they said this never happens. I'd be interested for any of you cornhole experts out there to tell me whether this does happen or whether I was just being hustled again by these guys. One night I also went with a couple of housemates to see O, which is a Cirque du Soleil show in Vegas. I really enjoy watching all kinds of theatre shows, and something that I don't do enough of now. I used to watch shows all the time when I was acting, so it was quite nice to see something different. I would recommend going to see a show that I saw in Macau called House of the Dancing Water. It's a water-based show, a little bit like O, but for me personally, this was 100 times better. House of the Dancing Water, that is. Much, much better than O. O was great, I did really enjoy it, but House of the Dancing Water, go and see that. After we'd finished watching O, we went down to the casino floor. Gazzy wanted to play some craps. I'd never played craps before. It's the dice game in the casinos, for those of you that don't know. And I don't really like gambling, as funny as that sounds as a poker player. I actually hate gambling. I always lose at roulette. I always lose at blackjack. I never win when I'm gambling, so I just don't enjoy losing. But I'm in Vegas. I'm gonna try something new. Gazzy's a good persuader, so he persuaded me to put $100 down on the craps table. He was explaining to me what I needed to do. Didn't really have any idea what I was doing. He told me to put a bet there, bet here, bet there. I basically wagered this whole $100 in one kind of betting round. The guy who was rolling, he rolled the dice, some sort of number showed up. I looked at Gazzy, and Gazzy had his face in his hands like this, and I knew that wasn't good, and all my money went away. In 10 seconds, I'd lost $100. Gazzy persuaded me to put another $100 down. I was pretty tilted at this point and I just wanted to win my money back, so I put another $100 down. Same bets everywhere. Same 10 seconds later, I'd lost all 100 again. It was so annoying. And then I said, right, that's it. One more $100 bill, that's all I'm doing. I'm not losing any more than $300 on this table. At this point, it was my friend JP to roll. He rolled for around about 45 minutes and money just kept coming back to me. And all of a sudden I started really enjoying craps, funnily enough. I think we walked away from that table I walked away with around about $700. Gazzy and JP had more because they were wagering a lot more money than me, but it felt like a really good win. I guess I'm a bit of a converted craps player. Still don't know what I'm doing, so I'd still only play with someone that I knew, and I still wouldn't wager that much because I hate gambling. Now to talk a little bit about the crazy Uber drivers in Vegas. They're everywhere. Pretty much everyone that picked me up had some kind of story. I do find them really interesting, just these kind of short-term friendships that you make in these Uber taxis for like 10 minutes. 2 taxi drivers that stood out to me as being really, really crazy. The first one decided telling me all about his alien conspiracy theories, and I managed to actually capture some of his chat, which I'll show you now.
So now what are they producing? They're producing at Area 51. They have the planes, that's the new ones, they cost $1 billion each one or something.
Yeah.
The eyeball on the pilot, he puts a headset on. If he moves it to the left or right,
Okay.
or up or down, that's how the plane goes.
Wow.
Where'd he get that from, the spaceship?
Spaceship.
Yeah, the same alien was doing the same thing. He was controlling the whole spaceship everywhere around.
The second one that I had, he was a fan of knives, and he wanted to show me his entire collection of knives that he had. Bearing in mind I'm only in this taxi with this guy for like 5 minutes before he starts pulling out these huge knives, and he actually gave me one of these knives to hold. And I remember thinking in this taxi, I really, really hope he's taking me back home. And at that point, when I saw all his knives, I had my Google Maps up and was making sure that he was actually taking me back to the house, because at that point I thought I was in an episode of Dexter or something and he was gonna go and take me and strap me to a table and use all of his knives on me. Fortunately, I'm still here. We played a little poker home game with my housemates. We had some poker chips. Mark had brought some tiny little poker chips that were quite cool, but we didn't have a button. So we used a Thomas the Tank Engine toy that we found in the house as the button. We were playing with sunglasses on, being really serious. I think we only put $20 in each. I managed to win that one, which was great, so I won $100 for a little home game. It also gave me a lot of bragging rights for the rest of the trip, as I could claim to be the best poker player in the house, kind of. I'm now gonna tell you a funny story about a cash game that I played right at the end of the trip. I was at the Rio playing 1-3, and I think it was max $300 sit down. I'd been playing for like half an hour and I'd won like $25, and I took a little break. I went away for like 10-15 minutes to grab some food, and then when I came back to the table, this is where it got a little bit weird. I was walking around the Rio cash room, which has about 40 tables, and I could not remember where I was sat. I don't know if anyone else out there has had this problem in these kind of bigger poker rooms, but I was just completely lost, and I was walking around for like 10 minutes trying to find where my seat was on this cash table, and I could not find it. Until eventually I was stood near this table that I thought I was sat at, but there was just no one sat there. So I thought, well, this can't be my table. Eventually, I walked over to the floor manager, who then passed me to another floor manager and then passed me to another floor manager, until eventually I had to say, quite embarrassed, I'm sorry, I've completely forgotten where I was sat. Please, can you help me? It was then that he knew who I was, because they'd actually broken the table and they'd bagged my chips up and put them away. So he gave me my chips and asked if I wanted to get back on the list for 1-3. I said yes, even though I couldn't really be bothered to wait around at this point. It was getting quite late. Anyway, I sat down for about 10 minutes waiting to get on this 1-3 table. I was actually top of the list, so it shouldn't have been too long. And I was literally about to leave and ask for my name to be taken off when they actually called me for the 1-3 game. I went to my table, and the first thing I noticed about this table was how deep stacked and reggy it was. Bearing in mind you can only sit max $300 on these 1-3 tables, and no one had less than $800, and some people had $1,500. Anyway, I thought, well, I'll sit here for a little bit, see what the table dynamic is. I sat down and I was straight in the big blind. Sometimes I have my headphones in when I'm playing. The mid-position guy, it folded to him and he was pointing at me. I couldn't really work out why he was pointing at me until the dealer looked at me and he started doing this, putting his hand up and spreading his fingers. So I took an earphone out and I was like, sorry? And he was like, five. And I looked at the small blind, and the small blind had put out $2. And it was at that point I realized I'd actually sat at a 2-5 table, and I only had $1,000 in cash at this point because I'd sold most of it off to a friend. so I didn't really want to be risking too much money, but I thought I hadn't played any 2-5 at this point in Vegas, so I thought, right, I'll put another $200 down and see how it goes. I was very aware though that the regs had seen me sit with $300 or so and seen that I was quite shocked that it was a 2-5 table. So at this point I thought the dynamic was going to be that they were going to try and bully me, which did happen quite a lot. Knowing this definitely helped though in some of the hands that I played. Excuse me while I'm telling this hand history, if you see me looking down, I'm looking at what actually happened in the hand because this happened so long ago and most of the hands I literally cannot remember. This hand happened pretty early on. I started the hand with $500. I was in the cutoff with ace-5 of hearts. It's folded to me and I decide to raise up to $15. Everyone folds apart from the big blind who decides to defend. The flop comes 8 of spades, 5 of spades and the 4 of hearts. The big blind checks and I have two options. I can bet or I can check. Because of the wetness of the flop, I do decide to bet to try and protect my hand. I bet $15 into 32 and the big blind check raises me to $50. At this point, I knew that this guy was a reg and that he'd been pretty aggressive for the couple of hands that I'd seen, especially as he'd seen me sit down thinking I was playing a 1-3. I thought he was going to try and walk all over me. I do decide to defend. The turn comes the 8 of diamonds. He decides to bet $75. I actually think I have a pretty good hand to call here with. I block a lot of his 2 pairs. I block obviously pocket 5s, and now that the other 8 has come on the turn, he only has one set of 8s that he could have. Obviously he could have some kind of 8x, but I figured he would have a lot of flush draws and a lot of pair plus straight draws, and I wasn't prepared to give up this hand just yet. So I do decide to make the call. The river comes the 9 of diamonds. He checks. I decide to check behind. I don't think I can get much value here. I have a pretty good showdown hand, and he shows up with 7-4 offsuit. So we pick up a nice pot against a very aggressive reg. The second hand I'm going to tell you about is a pretty straightforward hand. There's one decision in it that I make that I'm not entirely sure whether I should have. The Mississippi straddles on, which basically means the button puts out $10, so all of a sudden we're playing 2-5-10. I start the hand with $667. The small blind, who ends up being first to act if there's a Mississippi straddle, he raises it up to 30, and I have pocket jacks in mid position. Two options here, I think. I can flat or I can raise. I decide to raise. I make it $85. It folds back to the small blind, who wasn't the same guy as before, but he was another reg who'd been pretty aggressive, and he decides to set me all in. $582 more to me. I guess I probably should fold here, as I don't think he has 8s through 10s very often, and I think I'm pretty much at best flipping against him, and he could have queens through aces. I think if I had queens, I think it's an easier call here, but with jacks, I probably should let it go. But because I knew he was a reg and I knew he was going to be aggressive against me, I do make the call. The flop comes Jack, Jack, 4. The run good in Vegas continued. Didn't really matter what the rest were. He had ace king offsuit. We ship a $1,300 pot there, and that was a nice way to end the trip in Vegas. After that, I pretty much had winner's tilt, and I shortly got up booking around about a $700 to $800 win. Again, this vlog is running much longer than I thought it would. I need to get better at working out my storytelling and try and condense it. So I'm going to quickly tell you the last few things that happened in Vegas. I went on a night out in Marquee with a few friends, which was great. I didn't go out at all in Vegas apart from this one night. Had a good party with some of my housemates. I saw a friend called Justin who I'd met the year before in EDC. We went and played some blackjack. I lost $300 in 20 minutes. I was tilted. That was annoying. After that, I pretty much finished all my playing. I went and saw a friend called Celeste and her husband Chad in LA before I flew back to Malaysia to meet Alice to continue our traveling. That brings me to the end of World Series of Poker Part 2. I probably could have made 7 parts out of this whole thing. I'm going to do better at trying to condense my storytelling a little bit. Now that I'm back in England, I can play some more poker. Thankfully, because I've not played for like 2 months and I'm itching to get on the table. So the next couple of vlogs will be me either in a casino or a poker room playing some live cash games and getting ready for the Bahamas tournament, which hopefully I'll do a few vlogs when I'm there. Thanks for watching part 2. If you like what you saw, please click the subscribe button. Please leave a comment below. Let me know about the hands that I played. Let me know about cornhole. Really interested as to whether that was a unique shot or whether I was being hustled again. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks for a new poker vlog.
Still got rubbish hair.